Hello everyone and welcome to my Bachelor Nation 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Golden Bachelorette Joan Vassos' late husband's shocking past revealed. Golden Bachelorette fans are in shock over the details revealed about Joan Vassos' late husband's criminal past. The Maryland native, who passed away in 2021, was awaiting sentencing after pleading guilty to several charges. Keep reading for all the details. Joan Vassos' husband wasn't an angel. Golden Bachelorette viewers have cried with Joan Vassos when she talks about her late husband, John. They were married for over 30 years until he passed away from pancreatic cancer in 2021. While Joan is clearly still mourning her husband, she joined the Golden Bachelor hoping to find love again. She didn't find it with Jerry Turner, but she might with one of the 4 men remaining on her season of The Golden Bachelorette. Joan has only spoken lovingly about her husband on the show, but his shocking criminal past has come to light. A Bachelor Nation fan took to Reddit to ask if Joan's husband is the same John Vassos mentioned in a 2020 press release from the U.S. Attorney's Office. It was confirmed that yes, that is Joan's late husband. The press release revealed that he pled guilty in June 2017 to 1 count of conspiracy to commit mail fraud, 1 count of tax fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. What was he accused of? Directly from the press release, Golden Bachelorette fans react to his shocking past. Bachelor Nation fans on Reddit had mixed reactions to the truth about Joan's late husband's past. Some didn't think it should be brought up because he passed away, but others speculated whether Joan knew. Check out some of the comments. Joan's PR team, her kids, and the PR team for the Bac have worked overtime to shut this story down. I posted about this, and within minutes got a barrage of "I hope you die" type responses. I've been crying over a white-collar criminal? I am shocked to learn the man Joan can't stop talking about took away an opportunity from a minority-run business. I feel icky. I know this shouldn't surprise me because they've made plenty of disastrous casting choices before, but I'm very surprised that they would go with a lead who could easily have this story tied to them. Wow. This absolutely supports my theory that Joan is in this for the paycheck. She left the first season to try and make a run at being Golden Bachelorette. She's picking the highest income men, and if it doesn't work, will be an influencer. Joan Vassos had entered the Golden Bachelorette with a grace that spoke of wisdom, experience, and the kind of love that endures through time. She wasn't like the younger contestants who often wore their hearts on their sleeves, vulnerable and open to the world. Joan had seen more of life's ups and downs than many, having raised a family, navigated careers, and most importantly, loved and lost the love of her life. Her late husband, George. His passing had left a void, and her journey on the show was as much about rediscovering herself as it was about finding love once more. But as the cameras zoomed in on her heartwarming connections with the men vying for her affection, a darker chapter of Joan's past was slowly creeping to the surface, threatening to change everything. It wasn't Joan's past that stirred whispers behind the scenes. It was George's. Joan had often spoken of George with fondness, her eyes sparkling as she recounted tales of their whirlwind romance. They had met in college, 2 souls instantly drawn together. George had swept her off her feet with his charm and intellect, a man who seemed to know exactly what he wanted in life. Together, they had built a family, traveled the world, and shared a deep, abiding love. He had been her rock, her constant, until cancer claimed him a few years before she decided to embark on her journey as the Golden Bachelorette. To the audience, George was a shining example of the perfect husband. To Joan, he was her greatest love, a man whose absence she still felt daily. But as the show progressed, cracks began to form in the idyllic portrait of their marriage. It started with a cryptic letter delivered to the producers. An anonymous source claimed to have information that would blow the lid off the wholesome image Joan had presented. The letter hinted at a side of George that no one, not even Joan, had known. At first, the producers dismissed it as a ploy for attention. But as more details trickled in, the whispers turned into conversations, and soon, even Joan was being asked subtle questions about her late husband's past. The first real bombshell came during a candid interview segment. Joan had been asked about her and George's greatest challenge as a couple, and she smiled softly, recalling how they had struggled to balance their careers and family life. Then, out of nowhere, the interviewer mentioned George's business career, a topic Joan rarely delved into. George had been a successful businessman, but it was always his personal life she highlighted. Joan's expression tightened as she offered a non-committal answer about his corporate work, but the producers pressed on, subtly mentioning George's sudden resignation from a high-profile company years before his death. Joan looked visibly shaken but maintained her composure, saying only that George had always been a man of integrity, even when difficult decisions had to be made. That's when the producers received another tip, this time with documentation attached. Joan Vassos, beloved husband and father, had once been involved in a scandal that had quietly disappeared from the public eye. The allegations were vague but damaging. George had been linked to a series of fraudulent business deals in the 1980s, where he allegedly manipulated corporate earnings to cover up financial losses. While no charges had ever been brought against him, the accusations had been enough to force his resignation. The company had settled with stakeholders, and George had quietly moved on, focusing on his family and philanthropy. The revelations sent shockwaves through the production team. Joan had never spoken about this, not in any of her pre-show interviews, not in any of the conversations she had shared with the other contestants. Was it possible she didn't know? Or had she chosen to keep that part of George's life hidden, locked away in the past where it couldn't tarnish his memory? The timing of the reveal couldn't have been worse. Joan had just started developing a deep connection with Charles, one of the frontrunners. The two had bonded over shared values, their discussions about loss, and their mutual desire for a love that could last in their twilight years. Charles had lost his wife to cancer, and Joan's heartache over George's death had brought them closer. But when Charles learned of the rumors swirling around George's past, it caused a rift. For Charles, integrity was everything. He had been raised in a world where your word was your bond, and trust was sacred. The possibility that Joan had known about George's involvement in the scandal, yet never mentioned it, was a difficult pill to swallow. In a dramatic confrontation, Charles pulled Joan aside during one of their private moments. His usually warm and compassionate eyes were filled with a mix of confusion and hurt. "Joan, I need to ask you something," Charles began, his voice steady but laced with concern. "I've heard some things about George, things that don't line up with the man you've described. I need to know the truth." Joan's face paled as she realized what he was referring to. For a moment, she was silent, the weight of years of secrets pressing down on her. "Charles," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I didn't know. Not until after he died." She went on to explain that George had never told her about the scandal. It wasn't until she was sorting through his documents after his death that she found traces of the controversy. Letters from attorneys, old financial reports, and a brief note from George himself, apologizing for not being the man she thought he was. He had shielded her from that part of his life, wanting to protect her and their family from the fallout. Tears welled in Joan's eyes as she recounted the moment she discovered the truth. "I was devastated," she admitted. "The man I loved, the man I thought I knew, had been hiding something so big. But I also realized that the man who made those mistakes wasn't the same man I married. He had changed. He had spent the rest of his life making up for it, quietly giving back, trying to be better. And I forgave him, even though he wasn't here to ask for my forgiveness." Charles listened, his heart heavy with the weight of her confession. It was clear that Joan had loved George deeply, despite his flaws. But the revelation had shaken the foundation of their connection. Could Charles move past it, knowing the truth about Joan's late husband? Could Joan? As the episode drew to a close, it was clear that this revelation would have far-reaching consequences, not just for Joan's future on the Golden Bachelorette, but for how she saw herself and her past.